When the man trusted to guard the nation starts guarding secrets instead, something inside the system breaks. You can feel it in the silence, the evasive smiles, the carefully chosen words that never quite answer the question. That's exactly what happened when Director Patel stepped before Congress, and what followed wasn't a routine hearing. It was a reckoning. From the very first sentence, Senator Raskin made it clear this wasn't about politics or partisanship, it was about betrayal. Betrayal of victims, betrayal of agents, betrayal of the promise that the most powerful law enforcement agency in America would never be used as a political weapon.
The Epstein files. You want an FBI blindly loyal to Trump and to you as his enforcer so you can continue your cover-up of a massive international sex trafficking ring with more than 1,000 victims, betraying all of the survivors of the sexual violence. Before you got in this job, you called for full release of the Epstein files, telling podcaster Benny Johnson that the only reason the list was not released by DOJ and FBI was, quote, because of who's on that list. Upon your confirmation, you promised that, quote, there will be no cover-ups, no missing documents, no stone left unturned. And anyone from the prior or current bureau who undermines this will be swiftly pursued. This spring, you ordered hundreds of agents to pore over all the Epstein files, but not to look for more clues about the money network or the network of human traffickers. You pulled these agents from their regular counterterrorism or drug trafficking duties to work around the clock, some of them sleeping at their desks, to conduct a frantic search to make sure Donald Trump's name and image were flagged and redacted wherever they appeared, whether an email, a text, a letter, an interview, a photograph, or a video. In May, Attorney General Bondi reportedly told Trump that his name had indeed appeared multiple times throughout the Epstein files. And not long thereafter, in July, you and the Attorney General released a memo claiming that, quote, no further disclosure would be appropriate or warranted. In a few short months, how did you go from being a crusader for accountability and transparency for the Epstein files to being a part of the conspiracy and cover-up? The answer is simple. You said it yourself, because of who's on that list. Donald Trump's relationship with Epstein over the years is well documented. A week ago, the Oversight Committee released Trump's disturbing birthday book, Note to Epstein, written over a drawing of a woman's naked body, referring to a, quote, wonderful secret. The Oversight Committee obtained the note from the Epstein estate, not from the FBI, raising questions again of whether the FBI has been withholding documents. While you're unleashing the FBI to cater to Trump's desire to shut down the Epstein inquiry, the first 9 months of the Trump presidency have seen a spate of political violence and domestic terror events. We saw deadly attacks on political figures on both the left and the right. The brutal assassination of Minnesota Democratic House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband, and the attempted murder of Democratic State Senator John Hoffman and his wife, who miraculously survived a combined 17 gunshots. We saw an arsonist set Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's residence on fire. And of course, last week, we saw the horrific, cold-blooded assassination of Charlie Kirk in Utah that has shaken the nation. 1 minute after Charlie Kirk was shot in the neck, a 16-year-old shooter in Evergreen, Colorado, radicalized by white supremacist ideology online, opened fire and critically wounded 2 other students at Evergreen High School. We've seen lethal anti-Semitic violence, including the murder of 2 young Israeli embassy staffers just blocks from the Capitol, and then in the attack on a gathering of Jewish people in support of hostages held in Gaza in Boulder in June. We've seen continued mass shootings at schools, like the domestic terror incident at a Catholic school in Minneapolis last month, which killed 2 children and wounded 18 others. And in August, a man fired more than 500 bullets at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, killing a police officer who was a Marine veteran and a father. People like Melissa Hortman and Charlie Kirk should be able to participate in politics as elected officials or active citizens without being shot down in cold blood in the United States of America. People should also be able to go to elementary school, to middle school, to high school, to work, to the mall, and to church without being shot down in explosions of gun violence. The important position at the FBI requires a leader who puts public safety and national security and the rule of law first. I'm afraid, Director Patel, you've given us reason to believe you've used the powers of the FBI to serve Donald Trump and his agenda of partisan retribution. You've broken your promise not to do that. You've betrayed Jeffrey Epstein's victims and survivors. You've turned your back on the career law enforcement officers of the FBI, and as a result, you've left all of us less.
Raskin didn't raise his voice, but every word landed like a blow. He accused Patel of turning the FBI into an arm of vengeance, serving not justice but loyalty. The director, once praised for integrity and independence, now stood accused of reshaping the Bureau into something unrecognizable. And the evidence? It started with the one thing Patel once claimed he'd never hide: the Epstein files. Imagine hundreds of FBI agents reassigned overnight, counter-terrorism units pulled from tracking real threats, drug task forces suddenly silent. Instead, those same agents were ordered to dig through boxes and servers filled with old case files, witness statements, photos, and video evidence, not to find missing victims or map the global trafficking ring. Their mission was different, much quieter, much stranger. According to Raskin, their new task was to scrub every trace of a certain powerful figure from the record, redact every mention, blur every image, delete every email that might reveal a connection. For weeks, agents worked through the night, some sleeping at their desks, terrified of failing an order that made no sense to them. The promise Patel made when he took the oath, no cover-ups, no missing documents, no stone left unturned, had flipped into its mirror image. The transparency crusader had become the keeper of shadows. The irony was unbearable. Before leading the FBI, Patel had been a public voice demanding the full release of the Epstein list, telling interviewers the files were hidden because of who's on them. But the moment he gained the power to open those files, the doors slammed shut. A memo soon followed from the Attorney General's office declaring that no further disclosures were appropriate or warranted. Transparency was replaced with silence. Raskin's questioning peeled back each layer like a prosecutor building a case. He painted a picture of an FBI where political loyalty had replaced professional duty, senior officials forced to take polygraph tests, not to protect national security but to prove personal allegiance. Longtime agents pushed out for refusing to play along. He described a roving band of freelancing enforcers inside Patel's office, a hand-picked inner circle charged with targeting anyone who questioned his directives. It sounded less like a law enforcement agency and more like an empire of fear built inside the Bureau itself. The senator's words hit harder because they were wrapped in history. He compared Patel's leadership to the days of J. Edgar Hoover, when the FBI's loyalty was to one man's ideology instead of the Constitution. The difference, Raskin argued, was that the stakes were now even higher. In a world filled with new threats, cyber attacks, violent extremism, domestic terror, the country couldn't afford an FBI distracted by politics. Every agent pulled from real cases to protect reputations was one less agent preventing tragedy, and the tragedies were already piling up. Raskin listed them in a tone that grew quieter, heavier with each name. A state house speaker gunned down alongside her husband, a senator and his wife surviving 17 bullets. A governor's home set on fire, a conservative activist murdered in cold blood, a school in Colorado, another in Minnesota, both turned into scenes of chaos. Each event tied together by one thread, the growing sense that the system meant to keep Americans safe had been diverted, its focus broken. The numbers were staggering, but the meaning was worse. While agents were redacting names in secret files, lives were being lost in the open. The senator wasn't saying Patel caused those tragedies directly, but his point was clear: every resource misused for politics weakens the country's defenses against real danger. Public safety can't survive in the shadows of personal loyalty. By now the hearing room had gone silent. Raskin's tone shifted from accusation to reflection. He reminded everyone that Patel's story hadn't started this way. As a first-generation Indian American and the first Hindu to lead the FBI, his appointment had once symbolized progress, a break from the Bureau's long history of exclusion. That made the fall from grace feel even sharper. The problem wasn't his background, Raskin said, but his choices. Choices that turned ideals of diversity and transparency into a shield for political protection. Choices that made him mirror the very corruption he once promised to expose. The transformation from reformer to loyalist wasn't abstract. It was visible in every ignored oversight letter, every unexplained reallocation of agents, every unexplained delay in releasing public documents. Raskin's words were more than accusations, they were a lesson in how institutions crumble from within. The FBI's independence isn't destroyed in a single moment, it erodes quietly, one small compromise at a time, until no one remembers what neutrality looked like. But Raskin wasn't just talking about bureaucracy, he brought it back to people. The victims of Epstein's network, the survivors still waiting for justice. They were promised closure, they were told no name, no secret, no file would be hidden. Yet years later they're watching as those same files are sealed again, this time under a new excuse. While agents were busy redacting names, Raskin said, the survivors were still waiting for someone to call. It wasn't only a political failure, it was moral abandonment. He described the FBI as an agency in moral crisis, where fear of offending power outweighed the duty to protect citizens. Agents who once believed in the mission now whispered in hallways, unsure who they could trust. When a culture rewards obedience over honesty, corruption becomes inevitable. It starts with small acts, a redaction here, a delayed report there, until truth itself becomes negotiable. Raskin's larger warning was about what happens when that mindset spreads beyond one office. Loyalty politics doesn't stop at the FBI, it seeps into every corner of governance. The Department of Justice, the courts, even the intelligence community can't function when decisions are based on who benefits rather than what's right. That's why oversight isn't just paperwork, it's the only barrier standing between democracy and decay. For the audience watching, the hearing felt like a mirror held up to the nation. It asked uncomfortable questions. How much power should one man have? What happens when transparency turns to secrecy? Can we trust the institutions that were built to protect us if they start protecting themselves instead? These aren't theoretical debates, they shape whether justice is real or just rhetoric. As Raskin concluded, his voice carried a warning and a challenge. He said the issue wasn't simply whether Patel was loyal to a political figure, the real question was whether America's institutions were strong enough to resist political capture at all, because when loyalty outweighs law, freedom becomes fragile. When leaders stop answering questions, accountability disappears, and when justice bends for convenience, truth itself becomes endangered. The camera caught Patel's expression, still, composed, unreadable, but the silence said enough. Behind that quiet, you could feel the weight of everything left unsaid. Files locked away, names redacted, promises broken. The story wasn't over, it was paused, waiting for someone brave enough to finish it. That's why this hearing matters far beyond one director or one controversy. It's about whether we still expect truth from the institutions that act in our name. Whether the FBI belongs to the people or to the powerful few who treat it like a shield. Raskin's interrogation wasn't entertainment, it was a warning shot for every citizen who still believes oversight is optional. And maybe that's why this clip has spread across social media, because deep down, people recognize the pattern. We've seen it before, secrecy defended as security, power justified as patriotism. It always starts small, but it never ends small. Once an agency learns to hide information for one reason, it can hide it for any reason. That's how trust dies, quietly, one decision at a time. By the end of the exchange, Raskin's tone softened, almost pleading. He reminded everyone that public service isn't about loyalty to personalities, it's about loyalty to principles. He said the American people deserve a bureau that serves them, not the ambitions of a few. His message wasn't just aimed at Patel, it was aimed at every leader watching, every agent listening, and every citizen who still thinks democracy sustains itself automatically. It doesn't. It requires vigilance. It requires truth-tellers willing to risk comfort for accountability. The hearing ended, but the questions lingered. How many more files remain locked away? How many decisions are being made behind closed doors, under the banner of loyalty? How far does the rot go, and how much courage will it take to clean it out? Those are questions that won't be answered in one viral clip or one committee meeting. They'll be answered by whether people keep paying attention. So as the camera fades and the crowd noise returns, remember this moment. Remember what it looks like when one voice dares to challenge power inside its own walls. Remember that the fight for transparency isn't about headlines, it's about safety, justice, and the simple idea that no one is above the truth. If you found this breakdown eye-opening, take a second to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. These stories don't end when the hearing adjourns, they continue in every decision made behind closed doors. By staying informed, by questioning power, you become part of the oversight that democracy can't survive without. Like the video, share it, and help keep the conversation alive, because understanding what's really happening isn't optional, it's essential.